They say the worst prisons have no bars, just mirrors. Elias was an ordinary man with an extraordinary ache. By all appearances, he had a good life, a stable job, polite friends, a clean apartment with symmetrical furniture and curated art that matched the curtains. But when the lights were off and the world went quiet, he would sometimes stare at his own reflection and ask, "Who am I trying to impress?" Then, one morning, an envelope appeared at his doorstep, unmarked, sealed with wax. Inside, a card with a single line, "Come see what you've become." Beneath it, a set of coordinates and nothing else. Driven by curiosity, or perhaps desperation, Elias followed the directions. They led to a forgotten building at the edge of the city. Dust clung to every brick. The door creaked open as if expecting him. No signs, no warnings, just silence. Inside was a corridor bathed in muted gold light, leading to a large chamber. At its center stood the mirror room. The walls were covered in mirrors, elegant, antique, flawless. Each one was different in shape and design, yet all shimmered with a strange glow. Elias felt as though the room was breathing. He stepped inside. As the door closed behind him with a quiet click, the air shifted. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was watching. He turned toward the first mirror. What stared back wasn't him. It was a version of him, taller, stronger, more admired, surrounded by applause. And in that moment, Elias felt something unfamiliar. Not awe, not fear, temptation, and the prison had begun. Elias stood frozen before the first mirror, mesmerized by the man looking back at him. This version of himself had sharper eyes, a confident posture, and a smile that seemed to command respect. The crowd around him in the reflection applauded as if he had done something monumental. A golden light bathed him, casting long, majestic shadows. But Elias had never known such admiration. He reached out, just a finger, to touch the surface, and the applause in the mirror grew louder. Then, in a whisper only he could hear, the image spoke. "Stay with me. This is who you were meant to be." The voice was his, only deeper, more certain, more complete. Elias stepped back, heart racing. "It's just a mirror," he told himself, shaking his head. But the second mirror waited, drawing him like a whisper in a dream. In this one, he was wealthy. Draped in tailored suits, standing atop a skyscraper. Beside him, powerful men and beautiful women hung on to his every word. A private jet passed behind him, slicing through the clouds like a silver promise. Again, the reflection spoke. "This version of you doesn't beg for attention. He earns it. Elias turned away. But he couldn't stop the thought from burrowing deep. Why not me? Why not this life? The third mirror showed something more intimate. Elias in a warm, candle-lit home, surrounded by a loving family, a woman's head resting on his shoulder, children laughing in the background. It was everything he had told himself he didn't need, until he saw it. This time, the voice was softer. This is the version they would never leave. Elias's breath caught in his chest. Each mirror peeled back a hidden longing, status, admiration, connection. Things he had buried beneath logic and routine. But here, in the mirror room, logic didn't protect him. These reflections didn't just show what he wanted. They made him feel as if he'd already failed by not having them, and they whispered the same thing. You could have been more. The fourth mirror shattered that illusion. Literally. It was cracked, flickering like a broken video feed. In it, Elias saw a twisted version of himself, desperate, begging, scrambling to live up to every image he had just witnessed. He chased applause and affection, only to collapse when they faded. He abandoned his integrity for influence. He performed until he no longer recognized his own voice. And finally, he stared into an empty mirror. No reflection, just a void, a warning. Elias stepped away, trembling. He turned to leave, but the door he entered through had vanished. The room had sealed itself. That's when he realized the truth. This wasn't just a room. It was a test. Each mirror didn't show who he could become, but who he might sacrifice himself to be if he wasn't careful. The prison wasn't the room. It was his own craving for validation. He dropped to his knees, overwhelmed, heart pounding, breath shallow. All those versions of himself, so perfect, so loved, so untouchable, and yet none of them real. None of them him. The silence returned, not watching this time, but waiting for his choice. Elias sat with his back to the mirrors, knees curled to his chest, trying to slow the storm inside him. He could still hear them, the voices from the reflections. They no longer whispered, but echoed in loops, each promise clawing at his reason. You could have been more. This is who they would admire. This is the version they wouldn't leave. Each line struck like a hammer against the fragile glass of his self-worth. He pressed his hands to his ears. Shut up, shut up. But the room wasn't done with him. From the void, the mirror that had shown him nothing, a new sound began to rise. Not words, but a low, resonant hum, like the vibration of something ancient stirring from slumber. Then a voice spoke, not a reflection this time, not a version of him, but something older. You came here seeking truth, Elias. Did you think it would flatter you? His eyes snapped open. Who are you? I am the echo of every man who entered this room and mistook performance for purpose. I am the one they silenced when applause became louder than conscience. Elias stood slowly, wary but drawn forward. What do you want from me? Not what I want, Elias. What you need. The void mirror rippled like water. And for the first time, Elias saw not a fantasy, but a memory. Himself as a child, standing in front of a broken window, bleeding from the knuckles, breathing hard. He remembered the fight, the shame, the punishment, but more than that, he remembered why. He had stood up for someone who couldn't. No one had clapped. No one had stayed. No one had noticed, but it was real. He had been brave. True. Before they taught you to chase praise, the voice said, you knew how to choose meaning. Tears welled in his eyes, not because of regret, but because he had forgotten who he was before the mirrors began to define him, before love had to be earned, before worth was measured by echoes. You are not the man in the applause. You are not the man in the skyscraper. You are not even the man in the perfect home. You are the one who can stand in silence and still be whole. The words struck deep, not like arrows, but like truth. Slowly, the illusions began to change. The first mirror dimmed, the crowd dispersing. The second, the wealth and luxury fading into mist. The third, the warm family vanishing like steam. Even the cracked mirror, the desperate version of himself, flickered and vanished. Only the void remained, and in its center, a small, solid stone. Elias approached, reaching for it. It was owned at first. But as he held it, it pulsed with warmth. Not from without, but from within. This is not a reward, the voice said. It is a reminder. You are not here to be seen. You are here to see. The mirrors did not shatter. They bowed, and the door behind him reopened. Elias turned to leave, not with triumph, not with grandeur, but with clarity. And for the first time, the mirrors were silent. When Elias stepped through the door, the sunlight blinded him for a moment. The mirror room sealed behind him without a sound. He was outside again. Yet something was unmistakably different. The world had not changed, but he had. The trees still danced in the wind. The stone path remained cracked and weathered. But the air, it felt cleaner, as if it no longer filtered through the fabrications of his mind. He took his first step forward, and with it came a weight, not heavy, but grounding. Like truth resting on the shoulders of a man no longer afraid to carry it. A few villagers noticed him walking back into town. Some nodded politely, others looked away, as if uncertain who he was. He no longer wore the mask of admiration or the aura of ambition. His gaze wasn't searching anymore. It was still. Back at the village square, the same marketplace bustled. Laughter, trade, arguments. Life, as it always had been. But Elias could see the difference now. Most of them were trapped, not in stone rooms, but in their own reflections. He saw it in the young merchant, adjusting his appearance every few seconds, hoping someone would notice his new coat, in the elder councilman, loudly telling tales that shifted every time the crowd did, in the girl rehearsing her smile in the mirrored glass of a bread cart before approaching her crush. They were all in their own mirror rooms. Elias sat by the fountain, silent, not judging, just seeing. And then someone sat beside him. "Did you go in?" a voice asked. He turned. It was Mara, the blacksmith's daughter. Fierce, intelligent, once curious about him, but he had never given her much of his presence. He nodded. She watched him. And Elias didn't offer a grand explanation. He didn't dress it up in metaphor. Instead, he said softly, "I saw every version of myself I thought would make me loved." She tilted her head. "And what did you find?" He looked up at the sky. "None of them knew who I was, but all of them knew what I was afraid of." Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, not the kind trained for approval, but the quiet smile of someone who had asked a question with their whole heart and received an answer worth waiting for. "You're different," she said. "I'm real," Elias replied. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't ask for her to stay. He simply was. And in that presence, she chose to remain beside him. The mirror room hadn't destroyed the illusions. It had shown them, stripped them, and left Elias to decide what to carry back into the world. And he chose nothing but truth, not to impress, not to conquer, but to stand. He didn't need to be seen anymore, because he could finally see himself. Weeks passed. Elias became a quiet presence in the village, neither celebrated nor shunned, simply present in a way few understood. He no longer sought attention. He no longer chased affirmation. He no longer feared disapproval. And yet, ironically, people began to notice him more. Not because he tried, but because he didn't. The baker gave him an extra loaf without asking. Children sat by him during festivals, drawn to his stillness. Even the village elders consulted him, not as a leader, but as someone grounded, someone not swayed by shifting winds. But then came the letter, delivered by a traveler, cloaked in crimson. The note bore no name, just a black wax seal with a symbol Elias recognized from the mirror room. It read, The mirrors miss you. Perfection has evolved. Come see what you've become in your absence. He stared at the note for a long time. Part of him laughed. The temptation was absurd, but another part, the part that still whispered in darker hours, that still wondered if he could have more, be more, win more. That part stirred. That night, he lay awake under the stars, the letter beside him. Mara found him in the morning. She saw the letter before he could hide it. So, she said, not accusingly, but with quiet understanding. They called you back. He nodded. They said perfection has evolved. And you're thinking of going? I'm thinking of whether I need to know. Silence stretched between them, like a string pulled taut. Then she said, You don't go back to the mirror because the mirror has changed. You go back because you're afraid you haven't. That struck him like thunder. He looked away. What if there's more to see? There's always more to see, she said, kneeling beside him. But not all seeing is knowing, and not all knowing is growing. Elias clenched the letter. In that moment, he realized the test wasn't behind the mirror. It was here, in his heart, in that tiny seed of doubt, that hunger for validation reborn under a new name, curiosity. The mirror room hadn't changed, but it had learned. It knew how to repackage the lie in new forms, evolve its bait, polish its seduction, and wait for the moment when truth felt too quiet and the hunger for applause too loud to ignore. That was its true trap, not the illusions inside the room, but the invitation to return. Elias stood up. He walked to the edge of the forest and set the letter aflame. As it curled into ash, he whispered, I am not what the mirror shows. I am what walks away from it. And the forest echoed back his silence, not as emptiness, but as freedom. Elias had burned the letter, but the temptation didn't vanish with the smoke. In fact, it returned in subtler forms. A young apprentice asked him one day, How do you stay so sure of yourself? He almost answered with a story, but paused. He wasn't always sure. The truth was, he had learned to walk without applause. The mirror room had taught him something vicious, that we are addicted not just to validation, but to the illusion that being seen equals being real. And now, in the quiet of real life, when no audience cheered, when no reflection offered praise, he had to build his sense of self from within, brick by brick. That was the real work. There were days he still caught himself imagining what it would be like to walk back into the room. Not to fall for it, no, but just to see if he had really conquered it. But he knew that was just the trap wearing a new face. Ego dressed as curiosity. Mara watched him one day as he helped a child who had fallen. No grand gesture. No one applauded. no mirror to record the nobility of the moment. And yet, he did it with full presence. She smiled. It's strange, isn't it? Doing the right thing when no one's watching. Elias nodded. It's the only way to know it's really yours. There was a deeper loneliness in this kind of living. Not the loneliness of absence, but the solitude of integrity. He began to understand why so few ever escaped the mirror room. Not because they were weak, but because the world outside was too quiet. No one gives you medals for becoming whole. No one hosts parades for mastering your ego. No mirror glows brighter when you choose truth over applause. But still, he chose it, because peace, true peace, is not the presence of praise. It's the absence of inner war. And Elias was finally at peace with not being perfect, not being adored, not being needed by the mirrors of the world. He was simply Elias, whole, quiet, real, and for the first time in his life, he didn't need the world to notice. Years passed. Elias grew older, his hair silvering, like the quiet dawns he now embraced. The village knew him as a man of uncommon calm, a man who listened more than he spoke, who noticed things others missed. Children adored him, not because he entertained, but because he saw them. Not their potential, not their promise, but simply them. One rainy evening, a traveler arrived, dripping, breathless. He sat by Elias's hearth and spoke of a mysterious house beyond the woods. They say it holds a mirror that shows your best self, the man whispered, eyes alight. Not who you are, but who you could be if you were everything. Elias stirred the fire, a faint smile dancing on his face. I've heard of it, he said. I'm going, the man declared, his voice trembling with yearning. I want to see what I could become. Elias placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You'll find what you seek, but be careful. It may not let you leave. The man laughed, brushing it off. I'm not afraid of mirrors. Elias said nothing more. That night, as the fire crackled low, he stepped outside and stared at the stars. He remembered the room, the shine, the hunger, the slow erosion of self. And then he remembered walking away. There was no mirror now, but he no longer needed one. He didn't need to be told he was enough. He didn't crave admiration. He didn't even fear being forgotten, because he had something rarer than attention. Alignment. He had become the kind of man who could stand without reflection, who could live truth without witness, who could love without needing to be loved back. The mirror room had promised perfection, but it had delivered a prison, and by walking away, Elias had become something the room could never create. a soul unbound by illusion, a man whose dignity didn't flicker with the crowd's approval, a man with no reflection, yet more real than any image the world could offer. In time, the legend of the mirror room faded. People stopped seeking it, or perhaps they still did, but fewer returned. But those who met Elias, even briefly, carried something different afterward, a slowness, a quiet certainty, because he reminded them, without preaching, that the most powerful light does not shine on you. It shines from you, and the world, it notices, quietly, deeply, when you no longer need it to. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the world stopped applauding? Would you still move forward? Would you still matter? Elias walked away from the mirror, not because he stopped wanting to be great, but because he finally understood. Greatness isn't in the reflection. It's in the man who walks on without it. In a world obsessed with image, with validation, with being seen, maybe the bravest thing you can do is live without needing to be admired, to build a life that is whole, even in silence. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you pause and reflect on the illusions you might be chasing, then don't let it end here. Comment below. What is your mirror? What are you still trying to prove? And to whom? Your story matters, and your insight could be the spark someone else needs. Like this video, if it reminded you of the strength in walking away from illusions. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories like this. Stories that don't just entertain, but awaken something deeper. And remember, you don't need a perfect reflection to be real. You don't need a mirror to matter. You just need to stand, unshaken,